And to you, if you were to first grade what art is,
I think one definition of art, the encapsulation of an idea in maybe a visual form or an audio form or a written form, it becomes an object of record, I guess. That's an inelegant way to describe one way I think about art. Writing can be art, conversation can be art.
is this game art?
I think it has to be, right? And moreover, I think us playing this game is a different kind of art.
Wait, are you being serious or are you memeing right now?
I'm being serious.
Because we're bringing meaning to what?
Because what we're doing is not what the game is doing. We're using the game as a way to create a different kind of meaning. And the technology that's being interfaced with, and the lighting and the timing and it's all maybe everything is art. Everything created is art.
So you're saying two other dudes who are playing this game are not going to interact with us the same way we are.
Right.
In the same medium, in the same everything. So therefore, this is art.
Yeah, I think that's one way to think about it for sure.
That means then, like, everything you do is art. How you step on grass and bend the blades is art.
Driving is art. Yeah.
That's kind of wild.
That's the way I think of it. All the world's indeed a stage, and we are merely players, man.
So when you're smooth driving and someone comes by and gives you the digit, the middle one?
Yeah, it happens.
How do
you know what they give? They give me the finger. You know what I say? That's art criticism.
Hey, how's it going? I just wanted to call in and say that this is the first video in a series of educational videos about art, and where else to start than figuring out what art is. Right now, I'm getting a master's degree in fine art, and I've just been consuming so much art that I need some place to tell people about it. Keep in mind though, I may sound pretty dogmatic at times, but it's just my opinion, and I hope to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Anyways, I should probably get off now, but sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Bye. The first thing to understand is that art is subjective. Art isn't a science. You can't follow the scientific method and create a piece of art that two people would look at and get the same exact feeling or reaction from. Those two people would look at it in entirely different ways. Maybe it can be similar, but it won't be the same. A viewer of an art piece can look at a work and fall in love with it, while another might scoff in disgust. This is because they are, of course, individuals who are born unique, so it's impossible for them to have lived the same life, and thus they respond to things differently. In the same vein, two artists will never create the same art piece. It can look similar, it can give a similar feeling by looking at it, but the two artists would have had their own lived experience, their own research, their own personalities, and any number of other factors that could give something different to the work. But that's where a lot of the beauty is, right? These individuals find meaning from different aspects of life. Beauty is in the eye of the beer holder, but some of the more authoritative, or dare I say, fascistic-minded people may think art should be completely objective across the board. They may say that to make an art piece good, it always needs to follow a rigid set of criteria, and if it misses any of those qualifications, it is then labeled bad. Now, there's nothing wrong with having your own personal set of things you like to see in art. That's called opinion and taste. But the problem is when you want to force everyone to follow your rigid set of rules for art. When I see these overly objective people talk about what good or bad art is, I often see their own criteria is riddled with hypocrisy or contradiction between rules. Most of the time, it amounts to whatever that person deems art to be from their opinion, and they want to force it onto others. You can't logically argue with someone like that because they don't allow you to. To me, to have an all-encompassing objective view of art is pretty hostile and closed-minded, but it's also boring. And just to say, that doesn't mean there isn't quality in art, but the quality of something being better or worse is just a taste or opinion that you can convince other people to adopt, but it's not something you can force onto them. If your criteria for what art is too rigid, well then the art might start to look the same, and who wants to look at the same thing every day? In addition, any rule that you can make up for art, you can find an exception for. You can say, oh, I hate all abstract art. But what if you were to walk into a gallery and a piece catches your eye from the corner of the room. You approach it, and for some reason, it goes against your internalized rule, and you may not even be able to say why it's calling to you or why you see the beauty in it. You can try to lie to yourself, but your eye doesn't care. If it's beautiful to you, it will be there subconsciously in the back of your mind. Flip it around. You could love abstract painting. You could eat it up all day, every day. You may not have even seen an abstract piece you dislike, and you can't fathom not liking a piece from that genre. Well, maybe one day you see a work from your favorite genre, and you're like, whoa, it does all the things I normally love, but it's just garbage. Maybe you're burnt out or growing tired, but it goes against your preconceived idea of what beauty is. Those kinds of exceptions always exist, and that is one of the only facts about art that seems to be persistent. There will always be exceptions. Remember how I mentioned that every artist has a unique upbringing, history, and personality? That unique existence means that the artwork is then a subjective record of time. Don't get me wrong, some of the best artwork is timeless, and you can find meaning in it for eternity. But also, a piece of art is embedded with when it was made and what influences existed in its time. For example, art movements are reactions to what is happening in the world, and the artwork from those movements are also reactions. Dadaism was an art movement created as a reaction to the Great War. It saw the rise of nationalist politics and the unquestioning conformity of it, and chose to break conformity with absurdism. The name itself being absurd, one story says it was meant to mimic the first words of a child, while another story says it was a knife stabbed into a French-German dictionary and it randomly hit Dada, meaning hobby horse, or this thing. What is art? Art is a thing that is created by someone, and people perceive it in some form. This is the artwork, the artist, and the viewer. You really need all three of these things in some capacity to have art. It's kind of similar to fire, in how you need all three things from the fire triangle for it to exist. Well, 4 things, if you count the chemical chain reaction, although now it is sort of a fire tetrahedron. If we're comparing this to art, I think the reaction is what the artwork from the artist does inside the mind of the viewer. The viewer might care about it, not care, appreciate, love, hate, feel educated or confused. It's whatever reaction the viewer has in their mind from perceiving the artwork. All art produces that reaction. And for clarity of the triangle, the artist is whoever did the thing, the artwork is the thing, and the viewer is who perceives the thing. I have to use very general language like that because anyone or anything can fill those spots. I was at an artist talk once, and the artist said his best creation ever, or more specifically his co-creation, was his newborn son. Aww. On Twitter, about a year ago, I asked my followers, what do you think art is? Like, what do you personally define it as? With it being subjective, of course, I got a myriad of different answers. One of the top replies said, something that effectively communicates an idea. And that makes sense. Art conveys something. If you think back to our art triangle, that's the reaction in the viewer's mind where the art piece is communicating or miscommunicating a reactive thought. I wouldn't say effectively in our definition of art, because now that's a level of competency, and there can be art that fails to effectively communicate an idea, or a work that purposefully obfuscates an idea, maybe to confuse or to give a little puzzle for a viewer to solve before they completely get it. I've certainly seen art that I did not resonate with or understand. That doesn't mean it's not art, it just means that the idea wasn't effectively communicated to me, or that I am not making the right connections to it. It could very well be communicating with someone else who gets it, who just has a different background than me. Some artists, like the great Zadoslaw Beksiński, I need to get his name right. Some artists, like the great Zdzisław Beksiński, would never give anyone a hint about what his artwork was about, and was adamant that even he did not know the meaning of his artwork. He was uninterested in any possible interpretations of it. That's why he never titled any of his paintings, leaving them simply as untitled. However, even though the viewer is never told directly what the ideas are, that never stops them from interpreting it in any way they want to. The work succeeds in communicating something, even if it's a feeling or just acts as something nice for the eye to look at. Once you go further and look at his extended body of work, you wouldn't be able to help yourself from making connections from one piece to the other, clearly showing a shared narrative. The most liked response to my original question was, defining art is useless. Every time you make rules what art is or isn't, there will always be an artist to break those rules. I find myself in agreement with this comment. If we think back to the objective view of art from earlier, there will always be exceptions to the rules. Artists tend to not like being stuck in a box and hate being stuck with limitations. I go so far as to say that I'm a bit of an art anarchist, where I don't think art should have any rules. It doesn't make sense to limit it. Another response: art is what your whole life has been leading up to. Every single time, every piece, every day, from working on a movie to making a song, down to the way you do the dishes. That's true. Art is the result of the artist having been exposed to countless things, from other artists to trials and tribulations, from loss to gain, to happiness to sadness, to anger and love. Everything about the artist, from where they are in time and space, feeds into the work, whether they want it to or not. Art itself is a human construct, but not in the sense that someone constructs it physically, but that we as humans created it as a social concept. Again, it's not science in that it is a thing that can be measured by any sort of instrument or test. It's a way of thinking, and a way for our minds to understand our place in the universe. I think art is anything. And I hear you say in front of your screen, absolutely anything? And yeah, anything. Hear me out here. What's the first thing you think of when you think of art? Not any specific art piece or definition, just in general, what do you think of? What do you picture in your mind? Maybe a painting? You can paint with oil and acrylic. Throw some watercolor in there too. Some things that are similar to paintings, maybe a drawing. It can be physical material like pencil, charcoal, oil pastels, and my little nephews might be watching, so we'll include crayons. A drawing might also be digital. We don't have to be picky. And if you're a printmaker, you might say a print, and the many forms a print can exist in. With the advancement of technology, we got cameras and photography. If you cut up a bunch of these kinds of works and you put them back together, you even get a totally new thing. A collage. I think that's it. It's gotta be all of these things, right? But I must admit, this is only a portion of two-dimensional works. There's a whole other dimension we're ignoring. The third dimension. We've got sculptures, and that's not even a very specific word at all. You've got marble, stone, metal, and there are so many metals. Big and small. Put a little sculpture on your finger or on your neck, and you've got jewelry. Let's weave some fabric, put some of those fabrics on a model, and you got fashion designed by an artist. And while we're on the topic of design, graphic design, that needs creativity, and an architect can design a building, and we've already established that sculptures can be big, so is it building itself, not just a sculpture with utility? And you can go way back to the first 3D creations with utility across ancient cultures, and you have things like pottery, ceramics, woodworking, masonry, and that's just for starters. Back in the ancient world, when you weren't hunting or foraging for your next meal, when you weren't farming or trying to build the first things of civilization, you needed entertainment. The art of music and song, which obviously leads to dance, and we've had so many different kinds of music and dance throughout human history that it seems insane to comprehend. But wait, if dancing is art, then other performances can be art too, right? Like theater, telling stories, passing them on. You write that down and you've got a book. There's so many different kinds of book art. We've got photographers using digital cameras for the first time, and the decades keep rolling. The first pixel art, video game, video, throw it in there, film, movies, TV, cartoons, and animation. I miss all that three-dimensional stuff though. But hey, let's just make it inside of a computer. Using computers for art won't ever go wrong.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
As you can tell, art can encompass a lot of things. The art world at large already considers everything I've listed as art. Gallery shows, academic recognition in textbooks, museum exhibits. If people are buying it to display in their home, people are appreciating it as art. You might not even agree that video games are art. Maybe graphic design isn't art to you because it's too corporate. Maybe a collage is appropriating too much of other people's work for you. Maybe you see something like graffiti and think, a crime, vandalism, there's no art here. Or you might be absent-mindedly doodling on a sticky note or on the margin of your homework. That can't be art, right? You might be surprised to find that someone out there has already treated it like art. Someone has already exhibited that exact type of art in a gallery. People have already read about it. Why not be art? Again, it's subjective, and you'd be hard-pressed to convince anyone that what they think is beautiful isn't art. You can argue what is or isn't art or put some restrictions on it, but it's just a headache. It's semantics. And as someone in university, trust me, I've already read and argued about what art is or isn't, and it's tiring. It's a much more fun and productive conversation to talk about what art you or I like, or what anyone hates. It's much more fun to critique a work and figure out how the artist might be able to refine their idea into something even stronger. And it is so interesting to pick an artist's brain for a few moments about why they did what they did, to find what drives them to create the things that they do. Historically too, art used to be a lot more closed off and restricted. But let's say we're in that time. Say, I don't know, 1917, you're a decent artist, surrounded by other decent artists. You've got paintings, sculptures, maybe some pottery. But what happens when you see the same thing all the time and you get invited to submit anything to a gallery show? They make it clear that, hey, submit anything and it'll be included. The board who looks over the work doesn't even have the power to turn down any submitted piece for this show. So, what happens if you just think for a moment? I can submit anything? I can submit anything?
I don't want to set the world on fire.
Marcel Duchamp had submitted Fountain in 1917 for a show through the pseudonym R. Mutt. And it is noteworthy that Duchamp himself was a member of the board who called for the art. Fountain was a store-bought urinal turned 90 degrees to its side and signed under the said pseudonym. The board debated on their own whether it was or wasn't art, not knowing who actually submitted it, and Duchamp didn't make them aware that it was his submission. They had no ability to turn it down, so instead they hid it away during the show. Duchamp, in protest, resigned from the board and made it clear that he wasn't going to show off a cubist painting that others had expected him to do.
No, not rejected. A work can't be rejected by the independents. It was simply suppressed. I was on the jury, but I wasn't consulted because the officials didn't know that it was I who had sent it in. I had written the name Mutt on it to avoid connection with the personnel. The fountain was simply placed behind a partition, and for the duration of the exhibition, I didn't know where it was. I had a falling out with them and retired from the organization. After the exhibition, we found the fountain again behind the partition, and I retrieved it.
Historians often say that art history can be divided into two parts, before Duchamp and after Duchamp. And there was no going back after this, because Fountain changed the art world forever. What can be art? What is art? Were the urinals in our restrooms not designed by someone, created with the thought that others would be looking at it all the time? So, if I can point to the culprit behind my view that everything and anything is art, I blame him. And if I can defend it even further, isn't it more fun to treat something like it's art and enjoy the conversation? This is meant to be an introductory video about art, so I won't even begin to tell you about the art that only exists as concepts, but I will tease you by not talking about the wonderful world of male art. Like the letters, not the gender. To conclude with some main points, art as a whole is subjective and not objective. Art is a record of the time in which it was created. Art needs the artist, the viewer, the art piece, and the reaction from the viewer in their mind from perceiving it to be art. That's the art triangle. Art is a human construct. Art is anything and everything. And there are always exceptions. and it's just my opinion. Maybe this video should have begun with etymology, you know? The word art derives itself all the way originally from Latin artum, or more specifically, ars. Ars as a noun can mean skill, craft, or handicraft. Ars can also mean a trade, occupation, or employment. And it can also mean cunning, artifice, fraud. Is all art just a skillful craft done for employment that lies about what it is? It's a bit bleak. Seneca the Younger, a Roman Stoic philosopher, had noted that every art is imitation of nature. Does that make nature the greatest artist? Greater than all? What all art hopes it could ever be? Is the universe then the greatest artist? The only thing I know is that whatever we as humans want to create, it will be ours for the making. Have a good day. Drop a like and follow if you want to see more educational videos like this, and always create something meaningful. Bye. Actually get to see one in person. It's pretty cool.